The slide changed, and the room went quiet enough to hear the HVAC stutter. Camden didn't look at the screen when he spoke. He watched us instead, hands loose at his sides, voice calm in the way people get when they think the math is already done. The words landed clean. Anyone over 45 is done. Not a pause, not a flinch. He let the sentence sit and waited for the relief he expected from the younger half of the room. It didn't come. The clicker tapped again. A new header appeared. 30 under 30. Operating model. Beneath it, a bullet about velocity, another about security, age framed as risk, memory framed as drag. He talked about clean systems and fresh instincts and how speed decays when people stay too long. He called it safety. He called it necessary. My name appeared next. Chairs shifted. A cough died halfway through. The company lawyer's pen stopped moving. I felt the attention tilt. The way it does when a decision has already been made and everyone is just finding their posture around it. I didn't argue. I didn't look down. I looked at Camden and saw the certainty settle in his shoulders. He slid a thin folder across the table toward me. Dignity package, printed in soft gray. $10,000 in exchange for a total erasure agreement. No claims, no attribution, no future mention. A small payout to disappear quietly. My name is Maris. I am 46 years old. The sentence formed while I was standing there, watching my work reduced to a line item, realizing how fast a career can be converted into paperwork if the room decides it wants quiet more than truth. The lawyer cleared his throat and didn't finish the thought. His eyes flicked to the corner of my file on the screen. A red watermark bled through the margin, faint but unmistakable. He started to say something else. Camden waved it off without turning. I signed. The pen felt heavier than it should have. The folder slid back. Camden nodded once. Already moving on. By the time I reached the hallway, my calendar was gone. The badge reader flashed red at the elevator. A junior engineer stared at the floor and stepped aside. A brief note belongs here. This story is a work created by the writing team at Her Fear. I stood there, waiting for the doors that would not open. The building already closing around me, and wondered what kind of place offers money to erase you and calls it dignity. I didn't turn on the lights. The drive slid into my laptop with a soft click. The kind you only hear when you're waiting for it. The password went in on muscle memory. No hesitation. No second try. The screen blinked once, then opened to a directory that hadn't changed in years. A message popped up before the files finished loading. Access log updated. That hadn't happened before. My phone vibrated on the desk. A blocked number. I let it ring out. When the screen went dark again, another window surfaced on its own. A diff view I didn't remember building but recognized immediately. The safeguard wasn't a document. It never had been. It lived where contracts couldn't reach, buried in the code path that only ran under stress. The fork identifier jumped out. Someone had rebuilt my architecture instead of replacing it. Stripped the comments, renamed the functions, kept the bones. A corrupted copy. Close enough to work. Fragile enough to break. Another buzz. This time a text from an old teammate whose name I didn't save anymore. They pulled the legacy branch for the launch build. You weren't supposed to notice. My fingers hovered. The response stayed unsent. I opened the key vault. Empty slots. One filled. Mine. Still there. Never surrendered. Without it, the system would limp along. Clean dashboards masking slow decay. Latency first. Drift next. Then the kind of failure that doesn't announce itself until it's everywhere. A knock cut through the room. Too sharp. Too confident. I closed the laptop halfway and waited. Maris. A voice called through the door. Legal asked me to check in. I didn't move. The knob rattled once, then stopped. Silence stretched. The kind that dares you to blink. If they rebuilt my code instead of replacing it, what else did they keep because they didn't know how to let go? My phone lit again. New number. Do not activate anything. We can talk. The laptop chimed softly. Another access logged without my touch. I lowered the screen the rest of the way. Stood and opened the door. The office had been quieter back then, Before the glass walls and brand consultants, just a door that closed all the way and a table scarred by too many late nights. He didn't offer a seat. He pushed a tablet toward me instead. The build loaded fast. Too fast. A version number I hadn't approved. He watched my face while the demo ran. Like he was bracing for permission he didn't deserve yet. This gets us there in half the time. My finger slid the tablet back without touching the screen. The room stiffened. He leaned against the desk, arms crossed, the way he did when he wanted to remind people whose name was on the building. "You're slowing us down." The words landed heavier than he meant them to. I stood there, feeling the edge of a line we'd been circling for months. The data paths were open. The guardrails thinned to almost nothing. Acceleration without consent baked in. Growth that looked clean until you traced it. "I won't sign this." Came out steady, even though it cost me something to say it. His jaw set. He didn't argue the ethics. He went straight for the math. Market share. Investor appetite. The clock. He talked like momentum was a force of nature and not a choice. I opened my folder and slid the patent drafts across the table. Not as leverage, as a boundary. They stay with me. Silence pressed in. He studied the pages, then my face. The anger faded into calculation. He nodded once. Slow, like he'd just swallowed a loss he planned to collect later. "You keep the keys," he said. "If this ever goes wrong, you stop it." We shook hands without smiling. The agreement lived nowhere official. No announcement, no memo. Just an understanding that greed needed a choke point. If he knew his son would one day inherit the title but not the warning, would he have done it differently? The memory snapped back to the present when my phone vibrated again. A new message. This one shorter. "Camden doesn't know what he's touching." I locked the screen and reached for my laptop. The email arrived before I finished my coffee. No greeting. No signature flourish. Just an attachment and a subject line that felt rehearsed. Notice of filing. I didn't open it right away. I watched the preview pane load. Line by line. Until the phrase intellectual property theft settled into place like it had been waiting for me. My phone rang. Unknown number again. "Do not respond to anything yet," the voice said. Clipped. Urgent. They filed first. I asked how they could do that when I hadn't moved a thing. The pause on the other end was long enough to count breaths. "You accessed your drive?" That was enough. The call dropped. Not a hang-up. A cut. I logged into my bank account to steady myself. The dashboard stalled, then refreshed to a red banner I'd never seen before. Account temporarily restricted. I tried another. Same message. Another. Locked. The room felt smaller. Like the walls had edged in while I wasn't looking. I sent 3 messages. Short. Direct. Names I trusted. One didn't go through. One showed delivered and stayed that way. The third came back with nothing but a gray check mark and no reply. A new email replaced the first. This one marked urgent. Legal language pressed tight. Aggressive. Confident. They wanted me to know the clock had started without me. If he could move this fast without warning, what else had he set in motion while I was still deciding whether to breathe? A knock hit the door. Sharp and official. I didn't answer. The handle turned anyway. Stopped by the lock I'd never thought twice about until now. Maris. Someone called. Too polite. "We just need to talk." I slid my laptop closed and stood. The floor felt unsteady, but the pressure was clean now. Focused. Camden hadn't waited for a fight. He'd declared one and taken the first swing. My phone buzzed once more. A final message pushed through before the signal died. "They're freezing everything next. Move now." I grabbed my bag and stepped away from the door. I didn't open the file. I let it open itself. The safeguard folder unfolded into layers I hadn't touched since the night we locked it down. No labels meant for lawyers, no summaries. Just raw paths, timestamps, and a block of code flagged in red I didn't remember writing but immediately recognized. My phone vibrated. Same number as before. "Tell me you didn't dig into the black box," the voice said. No greeting. No softness left. I'm looking at it now. A sharp inhale on the other end. Then stop. Right now. I scrolled anyway. The function name wasn't dramatic. It never was. A conditional gate tied to audit triggers, regulator endpoints, and a payload I had hoped would never be touched. Not a shutdown, not a freeze, a release. You told me it was a kill switch. The voice pressed, "It is." I said, "Just not the kind you think." The first data set loaded. Original testing numbers, early benchmarks. Failure rates scrubbed out of the decks Camden liked to show. The second data set followed growth curves adjusted after the fact. Projections smoothed until they looked inevitable. A third file linked them. Clean and undeniable. Silence hung heavy. "If this goes out," the voice said carefully, "they won't just pause the launch. They'll open everything." I pictured the floor I used to work on. Faces that hadn't been in that room when the shortcuts were taken. People who would never know my name but would feel the fallout first. My hand hovered over the trigger. The code waited, patient. It always had been. What do you do when telling the truth burns the people who never lied? The call ended without a goodbye. A new notification slid in beneath the terminal window. External access detected? Not mine. Someone else was circling the same edges, close enough to feel the heat. I copied the block to a separate drive, encrypted it twice, and closed the laptop hard enough to make the screen flicker. They were coming for the truth. I needed to decide who would get there first. I sent the file at dawn. No note, no warning. Just a clean package labeled Beta Stability Build. Routed through a shell address that still carried enough credibility to open doors. The reply came faster than I expected. "This is generous." The message read, "What's the catch? I let it sit." Then there isn't one. It only runs clean under specific conditions. A pause stretched. 3 dots appeared. Disappeared. Appeared again. "We'll test." By noon, the first analyst report landed. Nothing dramatic. Just a footnote about unexpected dependency behavior tied to Luminex's backend. An hour later, another note surfaced on a private channel I hadn't visited in years. Someone flagged an anomaly. Someone else asked whether it was new or inherited. My phone lit up with a number I recognized and hadn't heard from since the filing. "Whatever you're doing," the voice warned. "Tight. It's working." I watched the logs roll. The beta held steady as long as Luminex's servers stayed clean. The moment their internal systems hiccuped just a little, the competitor's test environment started to wobble. Not crash, wobble. Enough to make smart people ask the wrong questions in the right order. An email chain leaked sideways, analysts comparing notes. One line stood out, forwarded twice without comment. Why are both systems failing the same way? Another call came through, this one shorter. "Regulators are pinging us," the voice said, quietly. I closed the dashboard and leaned back, hands flat on the desk. This was the kind of pressure that didn't announce itself. No alarms, no headlines, just a tightening circle. If the cleanest attack looks like cooperation, how long before Camden realizes he's being thanked for his own collapse? My inbox refreshed. A calendar invite appeared, unrequested, marked tentative, investor relations, late afternoon. Then another message followed. This one forwarded without context. Camden can't get anyone on the phone. I shut the laptop and stood. The war wasn't loud yet, but it was visible now to the people who mattered. The meeting started without him. That was the first sign something had finally shifted. The long table filled anyway. Suits settling into place. Voices lowering when the door stayed closed longer than expected. A screen at the far end showed a paused deck. The kind reserved for big announcements. I recognized the logo of the potential buyer before anyone acknowledged it out loud. The door opened hard. Camden stepped in, phone still pressed to his ear, confidence already arranged on his face. He crossed the room, slowed, then stopped when his badge flashed red against the reader. He tried again. Slower this time. Same result. A murmur rippled. Someone cleared their throat. "We've already begun," one of the directors said, hands folded, eyes steady. "Please wait outside." Camden laughed once. Sharp. That's not funny. No one joined him. I stood when the side door opened, not the employee entrance, the smaller one, usually kept locked. A few heads turned before I spoke. Recognition landing late. "Thank you for making the time," I said, placing a slim folder at the center of the table. "I won't take much." The buyer's representative leaned forward, Interest sharpening. The general counsel didn't look at Camden. He didn't look at me either. He watched the folder like it might move on its own. "You're not on the agenda," Camden snapped, finally lowering his phone. "I'm not staff," I replied, calm enough to feel the shift ripple back. "I'm here as chair of the trust." Silence thickened. Someone flipped open the folder. Pages slid free. Licensing language. Control clauses. The buyer's smile faltered. If a company can't sell what it doesn't own, what exactly had Camden been promising them? The badge reader chirped again behind me. Security this time. Camden's voice rose, then cut off when the door closed. The chair at the head of the table stayed empty. I didn't sit. I waited, letting the weight of the moment settle where his certainty used to be. The room didn't need me to raise my voice. It needed me to finish the sentence. I slid a single page across the table. Not a deck. Not a summary. Just the bylaw, highlighted where it mattered. The general counsel read it once. Then again, slower the second time. Someone at the far end stopped taking notes. "The guardian of the intellectual property cannot be removed," I said, keeping my hands flat, "without unanimous shareholder consent, including mine." A chair scraped back. The buyer's representative leaned away from the table. Interest cooling into calculation, the acquisition screen went dark without ceremony. That clause was never disclosed. Camden snapped from the hallway, voice sharp enough to cut through the door. It was filed. The counsel replied, eyes still on the page. "And it's binding." Another director spoke. "Careful. Your age reset triggered the violation." Camden laughed. Too loud. "You're ending a deal over a technicality." I met his gaze through the glass. The confidence he wore earlier had slipped, replaced by something tight around the eyes. If the rules were written to stop exactly this moment, who had really been reckless phones buzzed in sequence? The buyer stood, jacket already half on. "We can't proceed under these conditions." The door closed. Not slammed, just closed. Security stepped in without being asked. Camden's protest flattened into disbelief, then anger, then silence as he was guided away. The chair he'd expected to claim stayed empty. A vote followed. Short, clean. The word breach landed heavier than failure ever could. I gathered my folder and didn't wait for permission to leave. The hallway felt narrower than before, but the pressure had shifted. Behind me, the board was already talking about next steps. My phone lit as I reached the elevator. A new message, one line. "We need to talk about what comes after." I let the doors close and didn't answer yet. The call came after midnight. I recognized his voice before he finished the first sentence. Older, slower, still precise. He didn't apologize. He never did. "I told him not to touch you." I stayed quiet. The line held. He thought restraint was weakness. He continued. "I told him it was memory." I asked why he hadn't stopped it. The answer came without defense. Because he needed to fail where it mattered. The word test hung between us. Heavy and deliberate. I pictured the table from earlier. The empty chair. The way certainty drains when rules finally surface. "They're asking me to step in," he added, publicly. "I know." A breath. Then the offer landed. Interim leadership, full authority. The title Camden had chased like proof of worth. What does winning cost when the dust finally settles? I looked at the contract draft on my screen. The clauses were clean. Power, defined. Responsibility, endless. I imagined the meetings, the faces waiting for direction, the slow erosion that comes with becoming the symbol instead of the safeguard. I won't do it. Silence again. Not surprise, consideration. Then what do you want? I closed the document. The locks stay, independent oversight, no exceptions. A pause, then a single word. Agreed. When the call ended, another message arrived, forwarded without comment. Internal notice. Camden's resignation. Effective immediately. No farewell. No explanation. Just absence. I packed my bag without rushing. The elevator ride down felt different this time. Not lighter, clearer. By the time I stepped onto the street, a new calendar invite waited. Systems review, tomorrow morning, mandatory attendance. I accepted it and kept walking. The locks went in quietly, no announcement, no speech, just a series of confirmations on my screen, each one final. Governance rules that could not be overridden by urgency or charm, audit paths that stayed open, ownership that stayed where it belonged. When the last confirmation came through, the room exhaled with me. A knock followed. Hesitant, the junior engineer from the first meeting stepped in, shoulders tight, eyes fixed on the floor like it might tilt if he looked up. "Sit," I said, pulling a chair out with my foot. He didn't take it right away. I waited. When he finally did, his hand stayed folded like he expected to be corrected. "They told me you wanted to see me." I did. I slid the offer letter across. The role was modest on paper. The authority behind it was not. Read it. He scanned the page once, then again, breath catching on the second pass. "I'm not sure I'm ready." I leaned back. "You're ready enough." He swallowed. "Why me?" "Because you noticed," I said, "and because you stayed." His eyes lifted then, unsure, searching for the trick. "There isn't one," I added. Never looked down again. The handshake was brief, real. The systems review started on time. Names attached to decisions. Logs that stayed visible. When something failed, it was fixed without panic. When something worked, the credit stayed with the people who built it. The noise faded. The system did what it was meant to do. Here's the lesson I'm taking with me. Experience is not weight. It is memory. And memory is what keeps power from running wild. Thank you for staying with me through this. If you've ever been pushed aside for knowing too much, I'd like to hear your thoughts in the comments. I'll be sharing more stories like this, about boundaries and choosing yourself when it matters. If that speaks to you, follow along.